So how do we go from this to this? Let's talk about it. So this is Jakub's submission from Discord server, and you can see it's a Shaolin warrior monk. And this is his first attempt at creating bigger characters. First of all, I have to say, since this is your first attempt, you did an amazing job. Creating high resolution characters can be very intimidating, especially for beginners. Going outside of your comfort zone and expanding into fields that you haven't experienced just yet is extremely important if you wanted to grow as an artist. So this by itself is an amazing attempt. So the first thing I'm noticing here is that your awareness of three-dimensionality of certain forms is still lacking a little bit. So going back to basics and basic shapes and shading those and simplifying the human body into basic shapes will be one of the first things that I'm going to do here. And perhaps introducing and explaining how creases and folds in clothing kind of work in pixel art, because Shaolin monks have a very loose clothing, so I want to showcase that a little bit better. So let's start working on this. For you specifically, because shading is very crucial to conveying three-dimensionality of a specific object or a form or a character on two-dimensional plane, which we are doing, we have to have a good understanding of how something is. And usually you can simplify limbs of the human body into cylinders, so they are basically rounded. You did this very nicely here on the leg, not so much on this one, and especially not so much on this arm. These lines of single pixel width can be okay for highlights, but if you are always creating them all the way around, it creates this strange effect, and it shows me that the understanding of the shading could be better. So the easiest way how you can practice this is remove all of the tones except two. Have one tone which is going to be the light and one which is going to be the shadow. So I will take this mid-tone actually and paint over two lighter tones, and I'm going to take this shadow tone and paint over this secondary shadow tone. And now we only have two tones to work with. Something is either in the shadow or in the light. And usually when we are creating characters, we want to keep most of it in the light, because that's the place where we convey most of the information and most of the details. And we keep the shadows as a places to relax our eyes and create some depth. So what I wanna skip doing is creating textures right now. So basic first step is just creating the shadows. Based on this cast shadow, you can see that the left side is going to be in the light, and you have decided that also the top portion will be in the light. This means that here as well, I want the shadow to be on the bottom portion, and I want light to be on the upper portion, like so. I also want to erase any details and creases just for now, so I will erase everything. We can play around with texture just a little bit later. Since this is the belt, it's pulling the cloth towards it, so we are essentially creating this effect by just placing one pixel of shadow, which is enough for now. And if you want creases, you can certainly do like tiny little ones. You don't want to overdo it at this moment. And there we go. Overall, now this looks okay. However, I want to do the same thing here for these white portions of the clothing as well. So we have two tones here. We have the brighter portion, which is completely white, and we have this shadow tone, which I'm going to darken even a bit more. And now we have lighter tone and darker tone. And because I don't want to introduce texture just yet, because we already have this even darker tone which conveys the texture, I want to simplify everything into two colors. So the top portion is going to be in the light. Again, top portion in the light. And the bottom portion is going to be in the shadow. You can see how these lines of shadow connect. See? Here I want the left side to be in the light, and I want the right side to be in the shadow. Same goes here for the leg. And I want here to introduce it like that. Okay, so let's fix the belt. Again, I don't want any texture just yet. We will play around with it a bit later. And I'm going to leave most of the shadow tones here, just so we can see overall how the form of it will look like because it's rounded. I can also simplify this into only two tones, shadow and light, but I'll keep it just like that for now. And we have multiple colors for the skin as well. We have 5 colors. I want to have only one for the brighter tone. We have mid-tone, and then we have the shadow tone. So we only have 3 tones, and we'll play around with it a bit later. So overall, this is the starting point. Use only 2 colors. I'm well aware that the skin has 3 and the belt has 5, but overall this should be your starting point. Whenever you are creating a high resolution character, try to divide everything into 2 tones. Either it's going to be light or shadow. Now that we have the basics out of the way, and that is light and shadow, now let's play with the folds and creases a little bit. First, I want to touch upon this section because this is gray color, and when it connects with the outline, it becomes black. Or rather, we have the outline, which is also part of the clothing, and since this is only 1 pixel wide, if we introduce the outline, black outline here, it means that basically this clothing has 2 pixels of this gray line. So the easy way how you can adjust it is simply replace this tone with the black color itself. So what I did here is just basically transform this gray line into the outline of the black color, and when it comes back inside, it continues being a gray color. So now let's play a little bit with the folds. There are essentially 2 ways how you can do folds. One is create light in the shadow, or you can create shadow on the light portion. To give you an example, here you can introduce a little bit of shadow. Since this is the light portion, we have the shadow portion, and this is going to be our crease in the clothing. Just like that, it's enough. You can introduce a bit more if you want. You can even angle it like that. It's essentially creating these creases and folds in the clothing, creating like a denser texture. And the other way around is the opposite way. You can take the light tone and create it in the shadow. So for example, since let's say this section is in the shadow, you can create the light tone here. Since this is light in the shadow, you can see how this creates a nice little fold on the clothing. Essentially, if it's in the shadow, you want to use the light tone to create the fold, and if it's in the light, you want to use the shadow tone to create the fold. Now let's play a little bit with the shadow as well, since this section of clothing should be casting a little bit of shadow, just like it does here. I want the shadow tone to be conveyed in this section like so, because I want to create bigger sections of the shadow, because essentially this portion, you can imagine it being like that. So this section is in the light, this is the shadow portion where it goes down, and this is the light portion, this is the shadow portion. We could have done this in the previous step, but you know, if you know this couple of things that you can rework later on, you can always do it. It's never too late. Okay, and perhaps if you want to create a couple of creases on this section, we can do so like that. But I'll erase it just for now because I want to show it to you when we introduce more tones to the overall image. Since we have finished creating the folds for the legs overall, we can create also some extra folds here as well. And I see that this is what you probably wanted to do, but why not connect it with this section here, like so. And we also have a crease here on the arm. Even 1 pixel would do just fine to convey that. And here we can also introduce a couple of pixels to create those folds as well. Okay, so now overall, the reason why I have angled these pixels towards the leg where they go is so I can also convey the energy of this kick which this Shaolin monk is producing or doing. There is also one important thing that we should be fixing right away, and that is the anatomy. Now, if you imagine the spine going right down the middle of the body, because it's turned towards us, do you see where the head should be, where the neck should be, and the head, the center of the head? It's like the body is being broken down by the spine here and extended like that. It's kind of strange, it's kind of deformed. You can see that the shoulder of this portion should be right here, and this one should be right here, and in the middle should be the head. So because it's a bit offset, I'm going to select the head and move it to the left a little bit. I'm going to fill in these blanks. And there we go. So this is the before and this is after. You can see how the head was offset way too much. So this is an easy way how to fix it. You can just decide where the center line is going to be and you can move it towards it. Now we have reached a point where you can say, okay, Mislav, now what? I only have 2 tones. I want to introduce more details, more shadow tones, more light tones to the overall image. Now what can I do? Well, it's quite simple. You can create the lighter tone. Since you already have made one, I'm going to use that one. And I'm just going to make it perhaps a little bit brighter and desaturated. I think this looks just fine. And now I'm going to use this lighter tone only where the light is. So I will never go in and create something like this because this is the shadow portion. I'm not touching that. The only allowed area where I'm going to use this lighter tone is going to be where the light is. So for example, here, this is the lighter portion, right? This is the leg, so perhaps I want to create something like this. And now notice something, because this is all in the light. Now one tone which is going to be darker, which is going to be the shadow tone, can be this actual mid-tone. And this is going to be our fold in the clothing. So I'm essentially replacing color, and that's totally fine, as long as you're aware of what you are doing. So I'm going to do the same thing here. And I think I will just keep it like that and not to take away too much attention. There we go. And if you want folds on the bottom side, you can also introduce it like that. So it really depends on how much folds and details and creases you want to create. I want to warn you, the more details you put in like this, it's going to be harder to animate. So if you want to animate something simplistically, even keeping everything in 2 colors is going to be way easier than doing something like this. But, you know, maybe this is something that you really want. So let's keep on going. Since this is a shoulder, I want to create a little bit of light for the shoulder. And here as well. Perhaps a little bit of light here. And here as well. Now, I could also introduce a little bit of light here, but I won't. I want only this fold to have more light. And now we also have the fold here. So we are introducing a lighter tone on the light as well. So you can introduce those things however you want, as long as you're aware how you are doing them. Usually light and shadow works and shadow and light works, but also light and light works and shadow works, as long as you're aware how to consciously approach those things. And now if you want also some texture, I'm going to also start introducing just a bit of texture as well, because I've noticed that you want to introduce that dithering pattern. Now we can do that. And since dithering pattern as a texture style and not so much as a shading one, it's a bit noisy style, we can play on that card and also place some individual pixels around the overall body of this character, so we kind of blend everything together in a same style, cohesive style. And if I notice some portions that are in the way, I'm going to remove them. That's totally fine. Okay, now let's do the same thing for the shadow. So we have the shadow tone. And I'm going to make it just a bit more darker and desaturated like that. And I'm going to only touch the shadow. And on the shadow chunks, I'm going to make even darker shadow. So here, where we have the cast shadow a little bit, on portions where I think we would receive less light, I would also introduce a bit of this darker shadow tone. Here below the armpit as well. This is also a nice portion where we can introduce this fold in the clothing. Just a little bit here below the belt, not everywhere. And also here as well. Since we have a fold here like that, I'm going to use this shadow tone just like so. We can also do that just a little bit here as well. Okay, there we go. Since I'm noticing that you also have no face for this character, I'm going to show you an easy, simple trick how you can introduce a bit more information on the face overall. Since this is a Shaolin monk and he's hitting, let's say we are going to place mouth here. Above mouth we have the nose, and above nose we have this section between the eyes, and then we have the eyes themselves and the eye sockets, which can be conveyed in multiple ways, but let's say this is one of those. Now let's say we need the eyes the eyes can go here. So you can see how it kind of works like that. And there we go. So this is the easy way how you can just make a little bit of face if you wanted to. Now, what I think we should be redoing a little bit is taking this highlight. Since the head is a bit more complex shape, I just want to create like a bald head shine, so I don't overdo it, and I think this looks just okay. And now, depending on how you want to adjust the face and how much you want the emphasis to be on the face, you can create higher contrast or lower contrast. For example, if I keep the eyes black, we have a lot of attention on the face. If I just make it in the shadow like this, it's going to have less attention on it. If we want to have even less attention, we can keep the eyes a bit more neutral. You can even remove the face or nose like you did. You know, you have so many options. You can make a smug face, perhaps something like this. You can see it in the preview. It looks like a little smug face, a smiley face. You know, you have plenty of examples. It can be like that. You know, every pixel counts, and this is what I love about pixel art. So how you want to approach this is going to be up to you. Suppose you want to introduce even more details, like the highlights, for example, which you have here, which is even brighter tone than this. And I'm going to make it even a bit brighter. And now let's just pick few places where we want to place highlight. We don't want too many, but just a couple of places. And again, I'm not placing the highlight on these sections. I'm going to place them only on the lighter portions, which are here. Everything connects neatly. There we go. So we have the before and we have after. Now let's talk a little bit about the color of the skin. You can see that this is the highlight, this is the midtone, this is the shadow. I think I would like to have a bit more color, a bit more saturated color for the skin. So I'm going to place it like that. And the same thing goes for the shadow tone as well. The fist can have plenty of different shapes. You can make it like that. So you have the highlight on this section of the fist. You can have it like that. You can have it like that. There are so many options. So just pick one and stick with it. I think this one looks just fine. And here as well, you can keep it like that. It's totally fine by emphasizing the thumb. But you can also do it like this to emphasize the rest of the fist as well. You can keep it like that as well if you really want to emphasize thumb and the knuckles. Again, so many ways. Those are really up to you. At this resolution, on smaller resolutions, you only have like few ways how you can emphasize the fist, but at this resolution, you have plenty of options. Suppose we want to introduce another shadow tone for the skin. So we have something even darker. We can have the cut shadow here. Now you can create those eyes by using this shadow tone. You can change the nose if you want to remove the shadow tone and focus perhaps on the highlight on the nose. Again, so many options. We can adjust this a little bit like that. Let's take a overlook. Since we have plenty of this saturated and noisy style, perhaps you can do the same thing here as well. And we can keep on going and going and going. But overall, I think this is it. Okay, to conclude, this is the before and this is after. In simple steps, first take your character, adjust the anatomy a little bit, see where the anatomy is a bit offset or a bit deformed. Then you can use only two tones, shadow and light. The second step, introduce more light tones on the light section and even darker tones on the shadow section, if you have those. Then you can create highlights, check the details, check the detailing patterns, check the textures, and go over the one final pass on the entire character. And those are very simple steps. So for you specifically, I would say focus on the basic just a little bit more, on the shading, and try to grasp the three-dimensionality of a specific shape. That's all for today. I hope you enjoy the video, and as always, relax, enjoy, and have fun.